All right. You guys are gonna kill me on this one. So I finally saw
Oh yeah,
Gremlins.
you're going to get ripped into pretty hard on this because I saw
Why would
your
I be
tweet.
upset with you finally
I
watching one of the
know.
greatest film series of all time?
You're not going to like his opinion.
I don't really see how that is the case. The only thing I laughed at was when the lady got flung out of her house.
Well, that's the
By
part
the
that's
chair.
funny. First movie's technically not a comedy. I mean, it is,
Well,
but it isn't.
Like if it's supposed to be horror, I don't really.
It's a Joe Dante movie. That's the best way I can describe it.
Yeah, I love Joe
That doesn't
Now,
mean
the
anything
second
to
one
me.
is flat out supposed to be a comedy. Yes.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like as far as like this probably came out a couple years after Alien, I assume.
84.
I mean, they try to have a little bit of that element. I mean, just little Furby things. And then they just turn
That's
into
your
these little
problem.
things.
It's Furby comedy.
They just no. They're not interesting. They're just like, oh, we're wearing sunglasses and we're smoking a cigar and we're fucking around for the movie. And
what is wrong with this child?
The tone.
That's what I said. I saw him tweet this out, and I was like, "Oh, he's gonna get ripped."
The tone is just goofy, and it's like, okay, but it's not scary or funny. So I'm just kind of like,
what?
This is boring and lame. Like if it was an advancement for puppetry of the time, then congratulations on the technical aspects. But like, I just don't see how this is so hyped as a film. Like, it's just there's not much there. Can you explain? Can you guys start to educate me on this?
Already. That was a part of it with special effects. But
that's a neat achievement. But as far as the film, like quality of story or characters or anything, no.
You know the rules,
no
right?
Idea why.
You know the rules. Keep them out of the light. Like that is one thing that permeated the culture. The fact that you probably knew who Gizmo was before you saw this movie, I'm willing to bet. Right? Like he was
no idea. No.
You're well, then you live under a fucking rock, sir.
That is like surprises me.
Like
nobody in my life, no person in my life, no person in my life ever talked about Gremlins. Ever. Nobody. It was a non-movie in my sector. It was a nothing movie. I watch it now with things that I even know, and I'm
like
just
the
like
top 5 films of 1984. Man, it opened up against Ghostbusters and still managed to hold its own.
I think I'd prefer Ghostbusters over this.
Oh man,
I just
I can't fault you on the last thing, but.
So it's like there's one scene in it that I think would have been great in like a movie that was like better with the girl talking about her dad dying in the chimney. But it's
that is the movie.
What does that have to do with anything? What does that do with anything?
It does. It has everything to do with everything. That is the movie in a nutshell. Her story is the town now getting one of those stories.
Exactly.
Right? The whole movie is kind of this whole thing about. You got to remember, okay, in the 80s, it was all about consumerism. Gizmo and the Gremlins represent the ultimate consumerism toy, right? Like, Gizmo turns into the present that consumes the person who's got.
So let me already get in there. The father was getting his like adult son a toy or like a pet when he already has
his son wasn't an adult. He was in high school.
When he says,
"Oh, I need to get fault of the film," I will give Rook this. You have a problem
when he sees the little Gizmo and says, "I need to get my son this." I'm picturing 6-year-old kid or something that has never had a pet.
To be fair, and this is not Rookie's fault. The original script, Billy was meant to be like Corey Feldman's age, right?
That would have probably helped.
That's why they're friends.
Yeah.
Okay.
That would have made more sense if it was a younger kid.
And this is what I think happened. Was they ended up getting Phoebe Cates as the girlfriend. So they're like, well, now we have to cast it up. Because at that time, you got to remember how big Phoebe Cates was. She was huge. So they're like, okay, then that's when I think at that moment in time, they decided we're going to make Billy like this 17-year-old. But he kind of lives in this world of fantasy, right? And a lot of those elements got pushed out of the story. Look, I'm not going to make excuses for the film. I think the film is brilliant. I think it's perfect. Even with the silly rules, it makes them believable in its own way and in the world. I think the Gremlins represent the ultimate, like, they're not about so much killing, but it's just the human nature of craziness of consumerism and just the way we were in the 80s. I think it really reflects on humans at that time a lot. And that story about the father is kind of the movie in a nutshell, right? Like, that's kind of what Dante was going for with the movie. Is this is a wonderful life, but through the lens of a complete psycho, basically.
Like, I feel like if the rest of the movie had a few more scenes that matched that tone, I think that might have fell through
There
better
was
as a
some
whole,
stuff.
because it just wasn't. That was like just one isolated moment that I was like, well, that's good. And now here's all this other stuff that's just unrelated to that. Is what that felt like. Take it from somebody who doesn't know, who didn't grow up with the experience of the 80s, and like, how much knowledge do I have to know about the time period to enjoy the film? Like,
This is where I'm afraid of that. I don't feel like you should.
Alien, because I could watch Alien and not know all the specifics about it, and still have a lot that I can give it a lot of props for.
I feel like
I guess
knowing
to me, I get where you're coming from, and that's fair because this is your perspective, and I can't argue with that. And it shouldn't even matter. You're right. Like, you shouldn't have to know anything about the perspective of the time period or anything like that.
Yeah.
To me, this movie feels like it ages like a Disney film. So for me to hear you say these things, are not only just a shot to my heart.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah.
I just don't get it. And it's not your fault, I guess, at the end of the day. I mean, wow.
Well, it's because I'm looking at it also, like, the dad is like an inventor with wacky, crazy stuff. And that stuff had like nothing to do with anything toward the end or whatever. It was just like, well, that's like a quirk he has. It's like the Honey, We Shrunk Ourselves dad and his inventions, but his.
Well, that may be more of a social comment, like, or not social commentary, but just a thing of you being younger, and they don't teach enough like fantasy elements in school anymore with any of their literature, because
they don't
Gremlins, the whole point of having an inventor like that who has tinkering around with gizmos is that Gremlins, the whole point of them is they're known to get into machines and fuck them up. Right? That's where the whole idea of a gremlin comes from. And that's where what Futterman explains, the guy in the plow, when they're sitting outside the bar, that's the way people have viewed gremlins in American culture for the last, at that point, 50 some years. Right? Because that was what they used to do in World War II, is if something went wrong and they couldn't explain it, gremlins got into it.
Yeah, to me, Gremlins, I think, and like whatever I've learned, is kind of mixed with Goblin, but none of them are like specific to anything. There's just all these references to stuff, but there's no, as far as I learned it, there's no like origin to the history. It's just like, oh, here's these weird, freaky looking things that are in stories.
That's the American culture history of Gremlins right there. Otherwise, they've kind of combined it with a little bit of this mystery of folklore of, like, the whole Chinese Mogwai, meaning devil, little devil in Chinese, basically. Right. So, like, the whole spirit creatures, and that's why they're kind of dragon-like. Yeah. Like, there's all that element kind of brought into them, but also the idea that they can't come out during the day, and all that kind of stuff, And that's the thing is, and like I said, in our American folklore at that point, the gremlin had been associated with anything getting into the mechanics. The Twilight Zone really helped with that. You're right. With the whole, there's something on the plane.
There's something episode. On the plane.
And I have seen some Twilight Zone, so I haven't seen all of Twilight Zone.
There's something on the wing.
They
one of the most famous episodes ever with William Shatner. Yeah. Check that one out if you haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, I've seen the plane one. Yeah.
And that's where a lot of people remember Gremlins, that and the Looney Tunes.
Yeah, but it's like, I guess that was the thing for me, because like when it's just going, I just feel like there's just so many scenes of like they're in the bar and they're just screwing around. I was just kind of going like, okay, so like what am, like, if I'm not, like, what am I supposed to get out of this? I'm just like, are they like dangerous? Are they just screwing around? Do they?
Well, they're.
I don't know. I was just like, I didn't even know what they want us to feel as an audience member. I'm just kind of like, is this funny? Am I supposed to be laughing? Am I supposed to be scared? Am I supposed to, like, I don't even know what they're trying to invoke.
All of those things at once. Yes.
Like, I'm just like, I'm getting none of them. I'm getting none of them at all. I'm just like, okay, I don't know. The mom killed like 4 of them, like, by herself. I don't know. It just, wasn't one that hit for me. I understand that a lot of people love it, and that's cool. I get it. It's just one of those ones that just seems like just watching it without knowing.
Well, then you should have loved the second one because that's kind of what the second one's all about.
I didn't watch the second one because I didn't like the first one.
Oh my god, dude!
I have the two-parter of it, but like I just was like I needed a cleansing after that, and I didn't want to.
The second one is a cleansing after that.
The second one is
he doesn't understand. He's got to go watch the fucking
Key and Peele.
Jesus Christ! Like, yes, the first movie is supposed to be taken seriously, right? I get where you're coming from, and the reason you're acting the way you're acted was there's a few people who reacted that way to the movie. Like, it just isn't scary, it isn't funny. So Joe Dante's like, all right, I'll show you what I was trying to do. And then he literally makes a Looney Tunes movie into an hour and 45-minute Gremlins movie.
Do you like that one or think that one's worse?
I love it. I fucking love it. You shouldn't love it, but it literally makes fun of itself. Like, you have a scene where the guy is making fun of the rules. He's like, it's literally midnight everywhere. Like, how does that work? Like,
right.
So, like, that's the movie is a movie within itself at a point where they literally like acknowledge the first movie as not only something that happened historically, but as a movie too at one point. So you're really going, wait a minute here. Are we in a meta world or what the fuck is going on? And then the movie all of a sudden just erupts. Like, it stops. And Gremlins take over the fucking movie. Like, literally. Like,
the footage splits and all that. The real splits.
Like, this movie can't get any more batshit fucking crazy.
Oh, this thing is crazy.
Because it is. It's just fucking nuts. Because they said, here, we want a Gremlins 2. And Joe Dante's like, okay, I'll do it as long as you give me this amount of money and let me do whatever the fuck I want. And they did that. And it bombed horribly at the box office. But has become a cult classic of sorts way beyond the first film, mostly because of just how batshit crazy it is. And then that Peele skit put it on a whole new level because it's so true and accurate. You have to see the movie, though, to get the skit. Because if you don't see the movie, you're like, okay, I don't get it. Because in the second film, they literally take all the Gremlins and just make them wacky and goofy, and it's straight out, flat out satire comedy. Yeah. Like, I don't know how else to explain it. Like,
yeah, I don't know. I mean, that might work. That I guess I might give that a shot and tell you what I think next week.
But the first movie is a horror movie made for kids. See, that's what you got to understand. And maybe that's the problem, is you're too old for it. You have to have seen it when you're a kid, because it only scares and makes sense to a little kid. It's supposed to be the magical little creature that you got given as a gift, but it has the ultimate, price to pay with it if you fuck up the rules. And Billy fucks up the rules. That's kind of the whole overarching, main plot for kids. When you're a little kid, you see the movie. As an adult, you look at it and you're going, oh, okay, I can see what this is about. Because this came out right in the midst of the Cabbage Patch craze. And not only that, us as consumers were really, and I think that's part of the whole thing with having like the whole Chinese connection too, is in the 80s, we were starting to really kind of turn over a lot of our manufacturing to Asian countries, for instance. So like, there's that part of it too. And, there was that fear of what are we importing? You know what I mean? Like,
I got you. I mean, I thought that element
later on, we learned that, all these race cars and toys we're bringing in from China have poisonous paint.
Yeah, lead poison.
So in a way,
I kind of wish they dipped more into that in a way, because I can kind of see what you mean there, where it's like we're more careless about the things that we have in general, as to where they tend to treat things a little bit more with care, I would think.
They pretty much do that, especially with how they talk about how he treats men and then the old man coming back for him at the end.
Yeah, I'm saying that part's fine. That's fine.
You do with Mogwai what society does with all of nature's gifts.
Like, I almost kind of wish that character was in it more as well. I like the old man a little.
I understand.
I guess. I know that the chat is probably roasting me big time.
You got to see the second film, then you might kind of get it, because the second film totally takes the piss out of the first film. Like, totally. Like, you have to think of it almost like they're basically making an airplane version as a sequel. Like, it really is. It's the closest thing. I don't know if I ever told you about Jaws 3 People Nothing. Like, this is probably the closest we'll ever get to Jaws 3 People Nothing. This is Gremlins 2 People Nothing.
Jaws 3 People Nothing.
Okay, when they were making
Yeah.
Jaws sequels, the original producers are like, we can't keep doing this. This part 2 is too close to the original. The only way we can do this now, and Airplane was popular at the time, so like maybe we should just make it a satire. So they had, was it the Zucker brothers or who? I can't remember who it was. Sit down and write a script. It's out there. I think you can find it. Maybe it was John Landis who wrote it. But like it was called Jaws 3 People Nothing, and National Lampoons was going to produce it. It was supposed to be the third official sequel to Jaws, but it was also at that point them just doing a send up of Jaws because they couldn't. They thought, well, at this point we just got to make it a comedy. You know what I mean?
I assume so. They knew that the first movie made a lot of money. How much did the second movie make to it?
To Gremlins or to Jaws?
Or to the second Jaws? The
second Jaws did about a third of the first film. They knew it did okay. Well, that's where the studio panicked. They're like, you can't do that. You got to just make more of the same.
Because like I was trying to think of their process maybe in that time of like making sequels, because I kind of liked Jaws 2 in a way, at least the first half of Jaws 2.
Well, that's what the producers were saying.
We got away with it. About the shark attack. Like I like that aspect.
That's what he said. Like they're like, well, we got away with it with the second film. We can't do this again because people are just going to be like, well, you're just giving us the same thing again,
right?
And I've tried to explain. I think I remember talking about this. I don't know if you were on this show, but when Jaws 2 came out, like. People got to remember there wasn't a lot of franchises that had sequels to that point, especially something that prestigious.
Yeah, that's supposed to be one of the first to like sequel to like.
Well, it was the first one to ever have the number 2 in the title for one.
Right. Yeah, it might not have been on this show, but we have talked about that before. You've explained that to me with
yeah.
I mean, you had the Planet of the Apes, you had some of your other Universal horror films.
Yeah, but none of them had like Planet of the Apes 2 Escape.
Exactly.
Like, and all that stuff. Yeah,
you had Godfather Part 2, but that was Roman numerals, and people almost saw that as a second part, like a mini series kind of thing. To where when people are like Jaws 2, like that was completely different, and they even tried to advertise, all new Jaws 2, like that was all over everything.
Yeah. Well, hey, you mentioned The Godfather. I saw The Godfather last week, and I loved that. Okay, guys. Okay, fist bump. Okay,
we get that. It's just, we're still in shock here over Gremlins, man. It's to be honest, you are very, very small percentage.
Do you like rubber monster movies? Do you like rubber monster movies? Because Gremlins is like the godfather of rubber monster movies, man.
Okay, so I got to put perspective for people that might not get it. Like I was just looking through my movies, and I have like maybe 400, and then I asked how much Fancine has. It's like I have like 5,000. Like 3 to 5, just like maybe. I thought I have a big collection. Mine is puny compared to y'all. I've only been like into films for a little while, and then Tom has a whole store behind him with the stuff.
This is just part of it.
I am still watching a lot of stuff. I am the more that I watch, the more appreciation I can get for films. So like even for Gremlins, even though I didn't like it, I can see that for the time its puppetry was probably like freaking. I don't know how much puppet work that would have like. That probably was the most.
That was the big thing. Look, like
biggest amount of
Gremlins created a animatronics movie monster craze like you wouldn't believe. Because The Thing came out 2 years before that, and it didn't do anything at the box office. I believe that it would have been sooner had The Thing hit, but no, Gremlins hit. Right time, right place. Ghostbusters also had very similar kind of special effects. And that was the thing, is people were seeing things like we had never seen before. The thing about the Gremlins that most people didn't understand is 90% of them are Muppets. They're just Muppets. There's nothing special about them. The ones that are expensive and fancy are like the one you saw eating the cookie and like Stripe when he's hanging off of the fountain and stuff at the end. That's the expensive Gremlins. Those were the fully animatronic $10,000 Gremlins or whatever it was, or $20,000, $25,000 Gremlins, even more than that maybe.
Yeah.
But like what they did for the first film, they did that times 10 for the second film. Right? Like they had a whole warehouse full of Gremlins and shit that were way advanced. So you can see just in the 5 years between the two movies, or 6 years, how far. And I mean, Ninja Turtles kind of happened because of Gremlins, right? Like they had gotten to that point with the animatronics that are like, okay, now we can make believable creatures and characters.
To be a little more confident moving up from the typical costumes and
just a Muppet or like a basic Muppet, but like
there's a lot. I guess when you put it that way, I don't even think of like Ninja Turtles as like one of those types of ones, but they are, right? Like I like that stuff. I'm a Power Rangers guy, like come on, like I do.
Oh yeah, no, there's a straight evolution of like Jim Henson coming in with whatever he was doing, and George Lucas working together on like Labyrinth and such. There are key moments in movie history where you may had a huge jump in technology in as far as what we could do. Because I mean, just think about a few years before that, Jaws, they could barely get the son of a bitch to open and close its mouth. Right? Like,
all the malfunctions.
And then you get to Gremlins, and you've got a gremlin on screen that not only opens his mouth and closes it, but does a full-on snarl and can...
Yeah, they did a lot of expressive.
That whole thing with its head and just that whole spin, like that thing, to see that on screen in 1984, you're like, holy shit, that thing's real. Like it's
that's good. I like hearing that. I like hearing that was
that first time I saw that gremlin sitting on that counter eating that cookie, and he turns his head when he hears Billy's mom. Like, I would have loved to have been in the theater. I didn't get to see it until video, but like I can imagine in the theater, like that entire theater just went, holy shit, like, and freaked out because like we had never seen shit like that before. That realistic, without wires, without any kind of obvious puppetry, like in the way it moved so fluidly. And I mean, sure, it's a bunch of tricking our eyes at that time. It's, running at a higher frame rate, so it feels like it's moving smoother. They shot it much slower than it really was, and all that kind of business, but it just worked so brilliantly perfect at that moment in the movie that everything from that point on is just like icing on the cake, pretty much.
Yeah.
I gotcha. I mean, hearing the film techniques makes me like that aspect of it, at least. I do appreciate the achievements that come out of that, because that's...
Well, what went into the making of the movie is even more nuts. Like,
this does have commentary on here. I might watch watch the special features and them talking about the film, because just watching it with only knowing that it's super hyped, that everybody loves it. Like, that was all I went in with it. I knew so little about it. The only thing, I guess, going in, I was aware of the rules, because people repeat that stuff all the time in our sphere with stuff. I just also, I guess, the gremlin itself, the gizmo and stuff, like, there was things, people seem to like things like that when they were a kid. I never did. I was like, get that away from me. Like, not that scary. I just didn't want any of that stuff. I was
that came out in the 80s, in that time area where we loved those little kind of creatures and sidekicks.
Never into those little.
And that's the thing, is in the original script. That's the funny thing, is I'm curious how much what you would think of the original script, because it's out there. You can get it fairly easily.
It sounds like the original script is more what I would think would work for the.
You might, because the original story is more of a flat out horror story. What happens is he's more of a kid in the original story. Billy is. And when he gets Gizmo, he don't like Gizmo. Gizmo's a little shit.
I feel like that would help it already, because like I think of Child's Play and stuff, and like
because basically what you find out
right there, and that helps in like the danger aspect, where the what's going to happen, what are they going to do, what's going to happen. The kid is in danger at all times. What's going to happen?
Well, and Gizmo doesn't exist. That was what I was getting to. Is Gizmo is not even a character in the original script. Steven Spielberg is the one to blame for Gizmo. Because he came in one day and he saw the Mogwai and he goes, "Oh my God, they're adorable. We got to have one of these through the whole movie." And Chris Wallace had a heart attack. He's like, "What?" He's like, "I have only enough Mogwais built for the first, part of the film. Once they turn to Gremlins, I got nothing. I got nothing here." He's like, "How the fuck am I going to get this kid to be hauling around this Mogwai?" And you got to remember, these things are tiny. I mean, extremely tiny. So they even built big heads, like oversized heads that were like this big of the Mogwai. So when they do the close-up shots,
that's for that. Yeah,
that's what they are, is these huge Muppet heads, basically. And so he's like, "I got nothing that I can do with this," because in the original script, Stripe was the main Mogwai. There was no Gizmo, and Stripe eats the family dog after midnight. That's how they turn into Gremlins, and they kill the mother. They roll her head down the stairs when Billy gets home.
Just already you sold me a lot more.
They take over the entire town. Well, Steven Spielberg is the reason all this changed. They take over the entire town, and you got this news broadcast that's talking about them taking over the airport, which is a callback to the whole thing with the Warner Brothers cartoon in the World War II, them being attracted to airplanes and stuff like that.
Right.
And then you got the end of the story. The punchline is they took over a McDonald's. They killed and ate the people, but they left all the burgers
all
untouched.
The food there. Yeah. that'd have been funny in itself. And the
other thing about it that's different is they have the separation anxiety. Like the Mogwai or Gremlin, because I think they're still called Mogwai throughout the entire script. They never differentiate the two because they're pretty much the same. There's one has hair, one doesn't, right? Like that's the only difference at that point. And they basically they have this separation anxiety thing, so they use that against them. So they capture one and they drag them all to a warehouse and blow them up. And then the end of the movie is you think everything's fine, and then you realize they forgot about the one they had in the trunk.
Right.
So it's like, yeah, it's kind of like, there's still one left. Yeah.
I bet he would be a Critters fan. I bet Critters.
And that's the fucked up thing is Critters 2 is very similar to that original Gremlins script.
Critters 2 is very close to the original Gremlins. You would be a Critters fan. I guarantee it.
I guess I'll try Critters out. I'm gonna watch the special features of Gremlins before I try Gremlins 2. I like hearing the making of it a lot better than the film itself.
Well, and I've got a lot more stuff on the making of it than what's on that disc there. But
that stuff sounds really interesting.
I even have a bunch of test footage from Chris Walas of when they were trying to figure out how to do all this shit. They even had they don't have the footage, but they even went to the extent of putting an orangutan in a Gremlins outfit, and the motherfucker freaked out. So they're like, well, we can't do this.
Nope.
And that's what's sad is like, if you look at the Gremlins, that's probably why they are the body shape they are. Cause that's what they were probably thinking the whole time is for a lot of the shots, we'll be able to use the Muppets, but for these like long shots where we got bunches of Gremlins or we got Gremlins running around, we could probably just put a outfit on a monkey or
a monkey and have it walk the street or something.
And that's why they're the shape they are. If you look at them, they're like the shape of an orangutan or whatever, to where they got the long arms, short legs, stout body, big head. Yeah.
And so again, there's aspects that I like to it. I'll try to listen to the things that I liked,
because the original Gremlins, as they were explained, they're not really explained at all in the script. It was Chris Walas, who came in and designed them, and his whole thing was if they're night creatures, he gave them a lot of features like bats, right?
Yeah,
and then everybody's like and then he thought about the whole
humanoid bats.
Coming from China, then he threw in a lot of the dragon scales and the kind of the looks of a dragon, as far as just little things here and there. The mouth has a very dragony kind of.
The design of the Gremlins are good; those are fine. That is fine.
And I think you'll like the second film unironically, because you'll probably be like, now I see what this movie's trying to do. Because the funny thing is, the second film was a little bit of actually way ahead of its time. Way ahead of its time. Yeah.
How long after the first film did the second?
6 years. 6 years. Yeah. Okay. See, and that was part of the problem is Warner Brothers kept trying to get something off the ground, and they begged Dante to finally come back and do a sequel, and that's where he's like, "Well, fine, I'll do it, but it's got to be my way."
Right.
And they're like, "Whatever. Here's all the money in the world." They gave him a lot of money. That movie lost a lot of money. Pretty much, probably whatever profit the Gremlins made them, it went out the window with Gremlins 2, because they spent so much money on that movie. Basically, I think it's Robert Meyer Burnett. I think, wasn't it? Who had that story where he was like, I think it was Robert or Chris. One of them told me the story about. They were at Warner Brothers at the time.
Oh, yeah. I think it was Robert, because I was there.
It was Robert. And
Robert.
The whole warehouse of Gremlins, 2 Gremlins. Mm-hmm. And nobody was allowed in there because there was a couple, how many millions of dollars did he say it was worth of Gremlins in there? It was in the multi-digits. It was like a dozen million, like $12 million worth of Gremlins or something like that, he said, that was in there. And it was just insane. All the Gremlins puppets from Gremlins 2 were in this big warehouse.
And he did say he did go in there, so.
Yeah, they weren't supposed to, but he would go in there and show people shit all the time. Yeah.
The heads and stuff. I remember saying that.
What's funny is Red Letter Media bought a bunch of that stuff, because there was tons of Gremlin arms and other things they bought. Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah, no, I like that that these little supposedly cute things turn into, or they get into these egg things that are sort of makes you think of Alien anyway. Instantly.
Yes, there's a little bit of that with the pods, definitely.
I like that type of concept. What are these alien or foreign creatures? What is going on with
we talk about different kind of horror movies. This is a pod people movie. Okay, see, that's the other thing you should look at it as too. Although it's a creature not taking over people, it's definitely a pod people movie in that respect, and that's why Dante keeps having scenes from Body Snatchers throughout the movie.
I gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense. Yeah, I guess my biggest thing, I guess, is that there didn't seem to be as many like things set up to pay off. I guess like the lady with the issue with the dog, the father with the invention.
That's a bit that got cut out quite a bit. Was
there
Mrs.
seems to be
Deagle's
some
stuff.
things that I'm like they're setting up for me. I'm thinking that things are going to.
You've seen It's a Wonderful Life,
like,
right?
I know I've seen it. It's just one of those ones that.
Okay, well, here's the thing: if they would have left all the Mrs. Deagle stuff in there, you would have probably definitely got to. Oh, I see. They're doing It's a Wonderful Life, but with teeth, because Mrs. Deagle has this whole like underlying storyline that's cut completely out of the movie, and what it is she's buying up all this property in town, and she's doing it so she can dump toxic waste. Okay. So it's kind of like Mr. Potter buying up all the whole town. Yeah. So there's a whole plot line that got completely erased, and that's why the whole thing with her owning all these homes and shit, and she's bugging people for rent and stuff. So she basically owns like the Peltzer's home and Kate's home and everybody else in the town.
Well, and she's like rich and stuff, and I thought that would play with something with the poor. And you mentioned consumer stuff, but like that just seemed to be just like kind of separate.
And that was again lost in the mix of unfortunately the movie getting like chopped down.
The mom character, like they set up quite a bit before all the Gremlins start going around that his inventions work, but they're a little kooky and they sometimes malfunction, and like, oh, he's a silly inventor kind of a guy. But I thought that like the mom or the son were going to use his inventions to start, like, I thought that those were going to be more pivotal to defeating the Gremlins in some way, or to like fighting back.
Okay, what you're talking about is the Troll Man storyline or the Troll Hunter storyline that got taken out. Because remember the scene where he takes the sword and he chops the one's head off?
Yeah.
He's supposed to keep the sword through the rest of the story. He loses it though. In the movie we saw, but like,
I was more referencing like the little gadget that has the razor.
Let me explain this though. Okay, now you remember he's doing this art throughout the movie in the beginning, and it just kind of gets lost later on. Yeah, what he's drawing,
get lost.
What he's drawing there is the Troll Hunter character that he created, and that was supposed to lead into the whole idea of these trolls. Instead of trolls, he's fighting gremlins. So by the end of the story, he basically becomes the character that he's been writing this whole time in his little comic book. Like that, that again is also lost in the mix, and I think you would have liked that because at least he would have hung on to the sword the whole time. It's not his dad's inventions, but he hangs on to the sword. And his dad's inventions played a little bit bigger part in the other part of the story too. Got cut out because that's how Gizmo got his name. Because on the way home, you know how his inventions are always breaking. Gizmo fixes the bathroom buddy on the way home, and he just
randomly says, he likes the name Gizmo that I gave him.
That's not what happened in the original story either. Like I think this is filmed, but they just didn't use it in the movie because this is in all because Gizmo was an added thing later on, is what I've been trying to say this whole time.
I got you.
So he basically is sitting there in a car supposedly, and this is in the novelizations. And Gizmo fixes the bathroom buddy, and he goes, "You're good with those little gizmos, aren't you?" He goes, "That's a good name for you. I'll call you Gizmo." And that's how he got his name. And that's why I said it makes no sense that they call him Gizmo in that prequel animated series they got out now too. It's like, I don't even think people used the term Gizmo back then, but okay, whatever.
Yeah.
So you got the same name twice, huh?
But I like that you're informing me with this stuff, because I feel like this should help people, at least in the chat, understand my thought process going through a lot of this and what I'm noticing in the film.
It's a pod people meets
so many things just like left off, and then the one isolated scene. And
it's kind of a monkey paws story at the same time too, right? With the rules.
That's what it felt like at first, but then I was just like, they didn't really seem to like nothing about the rules specifically. I mean, we know what they are, but I don't. There wasn't enough. Again, there's so many things in there. There's so many things in the film that are just kind of like loose threads, or trees that start to grow but branch out into themselves. And I'm just like
well, that's the 80s for you. This is where
it felt unsatisfying by the end. I'm just kind of like, yeah, that was the movie, I guess.
I didn't have a problem with that at the time. I mean, I guess, but that's just the 80s for you, I guess, is the best excuse.
Right, but again, I'm coming in through it with just what I've learned and with what I'm doing, what I've seen and stuff, and what I know. And but knowing more about this makes me I'm going to watch the special features. I like that stuff. I like what you're telling me with it. That's freaking. This is a cool origin for this movie, and like how the making of it and stuff. I love this with that. But yeah, just I don't like it. But
I'm sorry.
I like talking about this. This is fun. And
well,
the chat.
Maybe you'll give the second one a chance and see what you think of that.
I'll give the second one a chance. I'll check out the special features and see what's up. But
right.
me and Gremlins aren't great.
Yeah.